Hey, it's James from Because Race Car here. Today we have a different kind of problem. Today I'm dealing with a problem with my tow vehicle. I've got a 2008 Jeep Grand Cherokee CRD. That's the diesel. It's got as much towing power as the big Hemi. Great car. Some questions about how it was built and designed. Recently I had a flat and I took the spare tire off the car, swapped it on, no big deal, threw the broken one in the trunk, dropped it off for replacement. And the stowage for the tire is underneath the rear trunk, and there's a winch mechanism that pulls the tire up. So of course, I didn't want to leave a dangling hook for a tire behind there, so I winched it up. And when I went to reinstall or replace the spare tire, basically what happened is I tried to let that out by unwinding it, and it garbled the cable, and the mechanism broke. Now I've been Googling all morning. Cannot find anybody anywhere who has disassembled one of these things, but I have. So I thought it was my responsibility on behalf of all Jeep owners everywhere that have had this stupid problem happen, and thanks to the forums I can tell it's happened often enough. I thought I'd share. So this is the doohickey that bolts. We're looking at the underside of it. It's upside down, or sorry, it's right side up. This is the way it bolts on. Basically there's your cable. You can see it's kind of got some kinks and stuff in it now. And over here is the doohickey you put through your tire, and it pulls it up underneath the trunk. So I've already disassembled this, and I really had not expected this to be a successful endeavor. I thought it would just, I'd take it apart and that would be the end of the game. So obviously I'm not finished, but I thought at this stage it would be good to show you what's inside the magic box once you drill out the rivets. So first we have the cover. We'll take that off. This is the part you see, and this is the thing you spin from inside your trunk. Then what we have is this the slip mechanism. So what we have is two retaining clips that basically are locked when it's sitting properly, which it is not, to the, so when you turn this, it turns this top mechanism. This top mechanism has retaining clips that turn this bottom piece. This bottom piece sits in a gear scenario. So I'll pull off the retaining clips, 1 and 2. I'm going to remove this. That just sits all the way through and rotates with the whole mechanism. This is the piece that rotates, in theory, rotates that piece when they are locked, and slips when that piece, when you hit a certain amount of force. So if I remove this little greasy piece, we have the piece that is supposed to be rotating when it's not slipping, and it sits. It is part of this mechanism. So it actually has an off-center hole that forces, so there you can see it's got an oblong off-center hole, and it sits in this mechanism and forces its gears to lock up with this piece, which is where your cable wraps around when you rotate it. And what this basically is it's a planetary gear reduction set. So as this rotates one way, it pushes this piece the other way at a slower rate. Gives you a little bit of extra torque for lifting that tire up, makes it easier to raise the tire, and slows down the whole process. I think this guy here is a brake. So in other words, if you take pressure off, the cable doesn't just drop out. I think this is what keeps your tire in place. So my plan today is to take this guy and put him back together. We'll put the planetary gear back in there. We'll put this off-center oblong doohickey back in here. I'm going to find a way to fix this piece to that piece so there is no there's no slip mechanism anymore. And there's probably a couple of ways I could do that, but if I can get that done, and I might just be able to drill this piece out to make this work, and have this guy with its slightly squared off piece that sits and just rotates. It sits on top of the bottom piece and rotates just this top piece here, because you can see it's got the matching off-center hole there, or a squared out hole there. If I can get that effect to rotate this, and I can just put some bolts and put this puppy back together, then the slip mechanism falls out of the mix, and I can literally wind it up and force it back out. And if I don't have this guard on the outside, well, that will leave it open to corrosion and such. Let's be honest, it's a 6-year-old Jeep, I really don't care. Then it's less likely that I'm going to have the problem of this thing jamming on me again. And since the only place to get a replacement part for this is essentially the dealer, it's $350 by the time you're said and done. It seems kind of silly since it'll likely break in the same way in a year or two anyways. So we're going to see if we can put this back together and whether it's worth doing. Okay, so this is a good moment to show you kind of the progress here. Just like at the racetrack, when I'm working at the condo, I do not have everything available to me. So I have a handful of tools here. I've got a cordless drill, some bolts, my miscellaneous box of random shit. And what was actually super helpful is I was just kind of digging through my toolbox looking for things that might be useful, and I realized I had a tap, quarter-20 tap, very, very standard sized tap. And, you know, grade 9 machine shop, I learned a few minor things, that's about all I know. And what I did is I drilled this sucker out, tapped it, and put through these bolts that I happen to have lying around. So now all I have to do is clean it up. I don't know if I'm going to glue it or I'm going to rivet it a little bit by flaring the ends, but I think I'm going to grind off the outsides, and then we can set this thing back together. I might have to make a trip to Canadian Tire to get some more bolts to put that together, but that'll be about it. But, you know, obviously the easy thing here is to grab a welder, put a couple spot welds there, and call it a day. Not having a welder, living in a condo, and never used a welder, and don't feel like going to find a guy that does, led me to this solution. So that's kind of step one, and then we'll see what happens next. Thank you, Dremel tool. I forgot I had you. And then when my box of power tools, and lo and behold, there she was, metal cutting disc and all. So here we have another good time to show you what's going on. So, cleaned up piece, all reassembled, or in the process of being reassembled. I found a cabinet screw like that one that works for the little rivet that was removed there that holds that, what I think is the brake in place. Then I have some other boring, whatever I had sitting around in my toolbox, quarter-20 bolts that I'm going to put in for where the other rivets were, 1, 2, and 3. And then we'll put the lid back on it and see if she works. I think it will. Okay, so it's back together. And my God, it works. Well, sort of. First thing I did, I put those bolts in. You can see I used some lock washers I had lying around for the 3 big ones. Again, I haven't bought anything to do this. I'm just using, you know, the junk that I keep in my toolbox from all the other projects. My other junk box to find some stuff, some tools I had, some drills, or some drill bits, cordless drill, and my trusty Dremel, and some random other things you're probably not supposed to use in this kind of repair. In any case, the only problem I have with it is that I put it together good and snug, and it wouldn't turn. And what I did to work on it without getting completely disgustingly greasy was I stripped the grease off with some dish soap. So now I have to go to Canadian Tire and do get some proper lithium grease for this. I will probably take it apart, grease it up properly, reassemble it, and then I'll throw it back in the truck. But essentially, I've just saved myself $350 in for 2 hours of work. Can't complain about that. Okay, so we've now reinstalled the tire winch that's back in the car. It went in like a piece of cake, even though there were bolt heads sticking up where I thought it might have to mate up to the body of the car. That wasn't an issue. So the whole piece is back in place. Tires back under the car where it belongs. Everything went well. So a couple important things. I did put Loctite on all of the nuts because I couldn't tighten them up completely. If you tighten them up too much, the whole piece doesn't work. That's why that spacer piece I was not going to put back on. I had to. It wasn't just a cover, it's functional. And the rivets are a specific length. So if you just tighten up with bolts, the whole mechanism just seizes up. Instead, what I did is I was able to put the bolts on, put Loctite on them with lock nut washers, and it sits fine. It's not super tight, but that's fine, it works. I loaded it back up with lithium grease after having cleaned it to do the work. And I Loctited all the bolts I put in to reassemble it, as well as the pieces to get rid of the slipping mechanism. So it's all back together. It's on the car. There's a photo here. And I just saved myself $350. And I think I had to spend about $15 at Canadian Tire for the grease and the Loctite. Not a bad day. Have a good one.